At 0201 hours on the morning of October 30th, the roof panels of a modified Kamaz utility truck retracted silently in the darkness. What emerged would fundamentally alter the calculus of modern asymmetric warfare. 12 first-person view drones, collectively valued at just $4,800, ascended into the night sky, carrying a mission that Moscow's military planners would soon discover had been crafted with surgical precision. The target: Russia's Koltsevoy fuel pipeline network, pressurized to maximum capacity with 7 million tons of jet fuel and diesel. The stakes: nothing less than the arterial bloodstream of Russia's entire Western military theater. The Ukrainian intelligence apparatus had spent months tracking a pattern that Russian logistics officers believed was invisible. Every fuel cycle followed a predictable rhythm, building pressure over weeks until the entire Koltsevoy system reached its operational peak. On this particular night, Russian engineers had achieved maximum throughput, 1,000 pounds per square inch, coursing through interconnected steel arteries that fed every airbase, tank depot, and forward operating position from Bryansk to Belgorod. What Moscow's planners failed to comprehend was that their moment of maximum efficiency was simultaneously their point of maximum vulnerability. The strategic context demands examination. Just 48 hours prior, Russian forces had launched a $200 million barrage of Kinzhal hypersonic missiles targeting civilian infrastructure in Kyiv. One projectile struck a maternity hospital, resulting in 14 civilian fatalities. Ukrainian strategic planners made a calculation that would prove devastatingly effective. Rather than respond to individual provocations, they would sever the fuel supply that powered Russia's entire offensive capability. This was not revenge. This was strategic decapitation. The 12 drones did not operate as a unified formation. Within seconds of launch, the swarm split into two distinct elements, executing a pre-programmed deception protocol that exploited fundamental weaknesses in Russian integrated air defense architecture. 8 units climbed to higher altitude, deliberately triggering detection systems while broadcasting electronic signatures designed to mimic Iranian-designed Shahed series loitering munitions. These decoys transmitted radar cross-sections that Russian air defense operators had been trained to prioritize as high-value threats. The psychology was elegant: present the enemy with targets they are doctrinally conditioned to engage, thereby creating blind spots elsewhere in the battle space. Meanwhile, 4 attack drones dropped to minimum altitude, initiating terrain-following flight profiles that exploited the curvature of the Earth itself. Their onboard artificial intelligence systems began feeding manipulated global positioning system data directly into Russian S-400 radar arrays. These drones were not simply jamming enemy sensors, they were actively conversing with them, providing false telemetry that confirmed Russian operators' baseline assumptions about harmless biological clutter. To technicians monitoring their screens inside hardened command bunkers, these 4 drones registered as nothing more threatening than a flock of migratory birds. Russia's most advanced air defense system, capable of tracking 300 simultaneous targets, was being systematically blinded by its own algorithmic sophistication. Inside the Kamaz truck, the Ukrainian operator monitored both elements on split-screen displays. He watched the decoy drones successfully preoccupy Russian defensive systems, creating the critical window his mission required. Intelligence reports confirmed the pipeline was at capacity. Everything hinged on maintaining this misdirection long enough to deliver the killing blow. At 0203 hours, Russian forces initiated their counter-response at 12 miles range. A Panzer S-1 mobile air defense system erupted from concealment, its twin 30mm autocannon cycling at 4,000 rounds per minute. The night sky transformed into a lattice of tracer fire. The first decoy drone vaporized instantly, torn apart by a direct hit. Seconds later, a second decoy was intercepted by a 9m-31 surface-to-air missile, detonating in a brilliant flash. Inside the Russian command bunker, operators observed 2 hostile contacts disappear from their tactical displays. Their assessment was immediate: successful intercepts, threat neutralized. This conclusion was technically correct but strategically catastrophic. What Russian crews failed to comprehend was that every muzzle flash, every rocket motor ignition, was broadcasting the Panzer system's precise coordinates with perfect clarity. The S-1's engagement radar created an electromagnetic signature as distinctive as a fingerprint. Ukrainian electronic warfare specialists triangulated the emission source within milliseconds. The Russians had not simply destroyed 2 drones. They had volunteered themselves as the next target on Ukraine's priority list. Russia's premier air defense system, the vaunted S-400 Triumf, did detect the 4 low-altitude attack drone. The 91 November 6 acquisition radar can track targets down to 5 meters altitude at ranges exceeding 250 kilometers. By any objective standard, These drones should have been engaged within seconds. Instead, the S-400's own sophisticated threat assessment algorithms executed exactly as designed, with results that would prove catastrophic. The Ukrainian drones were exploiting multiple layers of physics and logic simultaneously. By maintaining flight profiles below 50 meters altitude, they were operating beneath the S-400's optimal engagement envelope. The system is engineered to intercept high-speed aircraft and ballistic missiles, not slow-moving targets skimming terrain at 140 kilometers per hour. More insidiously, the artificial intelligence spoofing package was feeding the Russian system false positives. The S-400's algorithm examined the erratic flight paths, slow speeds, and low radar cross-sections and executed a classification decision that was technically perfect and tactically fatal. Biological targets, non-threatening, ignore and continue scanning. Inside the Russian command bunker, operators were managing an overwhelming flood of sensor data. The main display showed 8 high-altitude contacts, maneuvering aggressively. The battalion commander's order was clear. Focus fire on the high-altitude group. Ignore ground clutter. In that single command, based on entirely rational threat assessment, Russian forces sealed their own fate. Ukraine was executing a denial-of-service attack on human cognitive processing, exploiting the fundamental limitation that no operator can effectively manage more than 7 simultaneous priority decisions regardless of system capabilities. At 0205 hours, the operation reached its first critical inflection point. Then, physics intervened. The wreckage of the first destroyed decoy drone plummeted into a harvested cornfield below, igniting dry stalks. An intense localized fire erupted, churning thick black smoke that autumn winds immediately pushed across the low-altitude flight corridor. For the pilot controlling the second attack drone, his night vision feed transformed within seconds from crystal clarity to an impenetrable vortex of swirling darkness. He was effectively flying blind. He made the only decision available. He climbed 5 meters to escape the smoke. Those 5 meters proved catastrophic. The drone broke above the horizon line, exposing itself to a Podlet K-1 low-altitude gap-filler radar. The Russian electronic warfare response was not subtle. The Podlet K-1 screamed a high-intensity jamming signal across a broad spectrum from 2 to 18 gigahertz. The effect was instantaneous. Inside the Kamaz truck, 2 of the 4 main attack drone video feeds died, replaced by screens of pure static. Half the attack force had just been electronically decapitated. The situation deteriorated further. The Pantsir system acquired a solid track on the third attack drone. A 9-meter 31 missile streaked off the rail. The drone vanished in a silent, distant fireball. 3 of 4 attack drones were now out of the fight. The entire operation now rested entirely on a single $400 commercial drone. The last remaining attack drone suddenly executed a maneuver that would invalidate every assumption Russian electronic warfare officers held. From a micro-reel beneath its chassis, the drone began unspooling an ultra-thin filament, a single strand of fiber-optic cable thinner than human hair but capable of transmitting 1.5 gigabits of uncompressed high-definition video and control data per second. While Russian jamming equipment could flood the electromagnetic spectrum with interference, you cannot jam a beam of coherent light traveling through a glass core. The fundamental physics make it impossible. The connection re-established instantly, perfectly stable and completely undetectable to Russian electronic warfare sensors. To Russian operators, the drone remained a ghost. To the Ukrainian operator, his remaining drone had transformed into a hardwired extension of his own intent. He was no longer piloting through tenuous wireless links. He had become a first-person participant in the most expensive tactical engagement in modern military history. The drone dove back into the cornfield, using dried stalks as visual concealment while maintaining its fiber-optic lifeline. Ukrainian military intelligence had been explicit. At this precise hour, the Koltsevoy network was pressurized to its absolute peak of 1,000 pounds per square inch. This was a precisely calculated time bomb waiting for exactly the right trigger, and that trigger was now less than 200 meters away. At 0207 hours, the final 100 meters became a masterclass in controlled aggression. The drone burst into the clearing surrounding the pipeline nexus. 3 massive steel pipes, each 1.2 meters in diameter, converged at a central pressure valve assembly vibrating with barely contained energy. The operator took a final steadying breath. Final approach authorized. Godspeed. He pushed the controls forward. At that exact moment, his world split. On his virtual reality screen, the pipeline infrastructure rushed forward. But through the Kamaz truck's rear window, a new threat materialized. A pair of headlights, followed by the unmistakable silhouette of a mobile Pantsir unit. Russian quick reaction forces were 800 meters away and closing. Phase 3. Go, go, go! The Kamaz engine roared to life. lurching onto a muddy dirt track. 60 miles per hour in a 10-ton truck on an unimproved road was a desperate gamble. The operator engaged their global positioning system spoofer. To the Russian tactical network, the Kamaz had apparently teleported to the city of Tula, 120 miles south. Behind them, 30mm autocannon fire erupted, tracers ripping through pine trees at the truck's last known position, while the actual target raced away 300 meters east. The Kamaz slammed to a halt at a prearranged depot. The team bailed out, sprinting toward anonymous Lada sedans. The last operator out tossed a thermite grenade into the Kamaz cab, a final act of operational security. Inside the lead getaway car, the operator watched the drone's terminal approach on a ruggedized tablet. The drone was now just meters away. The camera feed was so clear he could see individual rivets on the steel valve assembly. The last image before the feed went black was the reflection of his own drone's approach in the cold, curved steel. At 0208 hours, the operator transmitted his final command. Release. The final first-person view drone, a 2.2-pound projectile, screamed in at 140 miles per hour. Its artificial intelligence guidance system was locked onto the World Geodetic System, 84 coordinates with sub-meter precision. The impact was not a blunt force collision. It was a surgical injection of controlled chaos. The 1-pound-shaped charge warhead pierced the 1-inch anti-drone protective mesh, then penetrated the half-inch hardened steel casing exactly 6 inches offset from the main valve assembly. The warhead fuse was set with a precise 0.8-second delay because the target was not the pipeline's exterior, but its internal pressure field. At 1,000 pounds per square inch, the energy from 400 grams of Composition 4 explosive was instantly trapped within the 3 interconnected pipes. With no avenue for pressure relief, the shockwave rebounded off interior walls, multiplying its destructive force with each reflection. The pipeline suffered catastrophic instantaneous seizure. The shockwave shattered the main valve assembly and tore apart half-inch thick steel welds. The ground heaved, and a 100-foot-wide crater opened, swallowing a nearby security bunker. A geyser of atomized jet fuel ignited, creating a fireball that reached 300 feet. The thermal pulse vaporized underground power lines and fiber-optic data cables. 12 Russian security personnel were killed instantly. 4 hours after impact, a Keyhole 11 reconnaissance satellite captured 12 crystal-clear frames of the aftermath. The 100-foot crater matched Ukrainian artificial intelligence predictive models with disturbing accuracy. But the collapse was not localized. It was a systemic hemorrhage that spread through the entire Russian military logistics network. Inside the Transneft control center in Moscow, technicians stared at monitoring screens as 7 million tons of fuel simply vanished from the digital grid. Pressure gauges across the Western distribution network flatlined simultaneously. The beast's heart had stopped beating. Sukhoi 35 fighters based at Voronezh were the first operational units to feel the impact, as combat air patrols were cancelled due to insufficient fuel reserves. Then armored divisions began grinding to a halt. 1,000 T-90 main battle tanks were suddenly operating on borrowed time with fuel reserves projected to reach critical levels within 72 hours. This created a 72-hour command vacuum that Ukrainian forces exploited with brutal efficiency. Coordinated counterattacks launched on 5 separate fronts targeted Russian positions that were suddenly deaf, blind, and operating on rapidly diminishing fuel reserves. The shockwave slammed into the Kremlin's political apparatus as officials scrambled to understand how a strategic fuel network could be neutralized by a $4,800 drone strike. The domestic price of gasoline jumped 15% overnight, a tangible tremor every Russian citizen could feel directly. Operation Serpent's Head represents a fundamental inflection point in military theory. A $4,800 expenditure neutralized 7 million tons of strategic fuel reserves and created cascading effects measured in billions of dollars. The cost-exchange ratio defies traditional analysis. Ukrainian forces achieved strategic effects at approximately 1/16,000th the cost of conventional operations. Russian forces discovered that spending billions on integrated air defense provides no protection against adversaries who understand how to exploit the seams between technological sophistication and human cognitive limitations. The S-400 performed exactly as designed, but design assumptions from an earlier era proved catastrophically inadequate. For military planners worldwide, Operation Serpent's Head provides a template that will be studied for decades. The operation combines signals intelligence, precise timing, asymmetric cost structures, and psychological manipulation into a campaign that achieves strategic objectives without deploying a single traditional weapon system. This is the new calculus of 21st century warfare, where information dominance and creative exploitation of systemic vulnerabilities produce effects that entire divisions could not achieve through conventional means. That lesson may determine the outcome of this and future conflicts.